everyone to Takeover Tuesdays. And that was not a stutter, that's actually the date. Thank you for joining us this February afternoon. It's Black History Month, and thank you for joining us in today's conversation with Black male educators. My name is Seth Bramble, and I'll be moderating today's panel, starting with a land acknowledgement and some introductions. Um, but my street address is on Rio Casumnes Circle. The Rio is Spanish for river. The circle is English. And as I speak these words, images emerge of the Miwok, of the cultural genocide in the Spanish missions, and of English pirates. And I want to begin with a land acknowledgement this afternoon, as we do at CTA events. Um, Rio Casumnes Circle. Casumnes has the suffix umne, meaning people, and the prefix is derived from the Miwok word kasum, meaning salmon, and I'm certain that my pronunciation is flawed, but I name the history of where I live as a gesture of respect and reparation toward the indigenous residents of the colonized land I now call home. And I acknowledge the profound suffering caused by the theft and colonization of this land, and grieve the ongoing systematic harm to Miwok culture, as well as to all the indigenous cultures of what we now call California. I honor the Miwok as the ancestral stewards of this land where I live, and invite you to join me in doing your own land acknowledgement in the chat. Who were the original inhabitants? Join me in efforts to name a troubled past and commit to a present and future for the indigenous people that first cared for the land on which you stand. And in taking this action, we stand in solidarity, knowing that it's not enough, but that it's a start. I began my teaching career in 1999. I currently serve as a legislative advocate for the California Teachers Association, and I'm honored to be in extraordinary company to have with me this panel of Black male educators who I admire, thinking about supporting educators who are Black men, and for supporting Black male students. You may hear some ideas sent around that simply do not represent your reality, and this is the time to lean in. Over the next hour, I'll be asking these brothers a couple questions, creating space for them to share their experiences, and they are powerful voices, so listen good and be open to stories that make you uncomfortable. Those spaces of discomfort are the good stuff, and it's where I learn most. We will be talking about racial justice and social justice today, and I want to start by asking each of you, panelists, as you introduce yourself, tell us about your role in education. For how long have you held this identity or role, but also share what it's like as an educated Black man. I'm sorry, I meant to say as an educator who is a Black man, impacted, how has that impacted this role? The fact that you are a Black male educator. When you talk about this role that you identify as, how has being a Black male educator impacted that role? So let's start with Toby.
Thank you, Seth. For those of you who do not know me, I'm E. Toby Boyd. I am a kindergarten educator for the last 26 years. I started in 1994, and I'm currently serving as the president of the California Teachers Association. Seth, that was a mouthful of what you asked, and my kindergarten tracking is only, you give me one item and then I can talk to you about it, and then we can continue on from that. But I think you asked about my journey into education and how that has influenced what I do today. For those of you who do not know, too, and I make no assumptions, I am the first Black president of this organization of over 150 years. And I say that with a lot of pride because it took us this long in order to get here to this space. And I hope and pray that it doesn't take us another 150 years to have another Black person, neither male, woman, or non-binary person, to fit into the space. My career as an educator is speckled because when I was hired into my district, I was hired because there were not many Blacks in the space. So I went into the space hoping to be an example for the students that I wanted to serve. And I was very intentional because I wanted to teach in a lower socioeconomic school, which were back then called Title Ones. I'm not sure if they're still that or if they're a different title for them. But I chose the school that I wanted to teach in because I knew that the surrounding area had a lot of single mothers that happened to have Black children in their households. And I wanted to be that positive influence on children that look like me to show them that there are, and I hate to do a stereotype, but there are positive things that a Black man can afford them in their lives. And to show them love would be a disciplinarian. Now, people say, well, Black men are the ones that are going to be the disciplinarians in the school. And that's the reason why I wanted kinder, because I didn't want to be that typical, and I'll do that in quotation marks, educator that was there and you were sent all the bad kids. Well, that wasn't my role. My role was to build that foundation in which they can uplift themselves to be better before they got to the later grades and needed that assistance. So I probably went way beyond the point, Seth, that you wanted me to start off with, but I'll stop there, and I'm sure that we'll get into more details about our journeys. So I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Appreciate that. Let's go to next to Van Cedric. Just as a reminder, your name, of course, and your role in education, how long you've been in that role, but also think about what it means to be a Black male educator and how it's impacted your role.
Thank you, Seth, for that. And every time I'm around you, Toby, I learn a little bit more about you. Thank you for sharing. It is a blessing to see what has motivated you, and it shows you do the right things, and it pays off later on in life. So, what a blessing. Myself, I am Van Cedric Williams. Or first, I want to say hi to family, friends, and my union siblings. I'm glad that I'm here today to be a part of this opportunity to be with some great mentors on the call, on the panel today. It is a blessing, something that I could have never imagined. So I just want to thank CTA and Takeoff Tuesdays for allowing me this opportunity to join. Thank you, Seth, as well. I'm Van Cedric Williams, 22 years educator in San Francisco, social studies. I've taught grades 6 through 12. It's really crazy because when I got my degree and I moved up to San Francisco, I actually went through the district office and did all the preliminary applications, and I got an interview, and at the interview, the HR person says, "We don't have any positions for you, and but you can be a substitute, and we have a list of schools that you can sub at." And so she gave me the list, and it was over in the African American neighborhood in the Bayview of San Francisco. And actually, that was the right spot for me. I was, later on, I was like, I can't believe it. We have turnover every year of 200-300 folks a year at our school district. And the year that I applied, my school district said there were no positions in that. They could only offer me a sub. And I subbed at the school that I needed to be at, which was Gloria Davis in the Bayview African American community. Just really was a blessing. It was a homecoming. The young folks really taught me what it meant to be an educator. Everything I learned in the credentialing class, I put over to the shelf, to the side, and really understood and talked to young folks and found out what really was what mattered to them. So I say that because that my relationship with my students as a first time teacher um, impacted me. It still drives me to this day. And every grade level that I have taught, like many educators, I have cried multiple times throughout the year and each grade level because you just so badly inside want the best for these young kids, for our students. You so badly you want them to have a chance to have a quality life, and so that has impacted me to this day with the work that I've done. And I've been fortunate. I'll end this. I'll be fortunate. I was able to, by the help of Claire Merced, she brought me into the local union. Um, Helped me become a union building rep, mentored me, but I've been able to parlay that into being a treasurer for the union, a NEA board director, District 2, and an OUSD, Oakland Unified School District director. So I do this work because of the impact that the young folks have had on me from day one walking into the school site. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Van Cedric. Robert, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Seth. I'm Robert Ellis, and I am a 22-year veteran teacher in Richmond, California. I'm with the United Teachers of Richmond. And I currently teach fifth grade there with a teaching partner, which is a blessing. I am also honored to be elected to serve on the CTA Board of Directors as a director at large. I still have one foot in the classroom because for many reasons, but particularly because we are so short Black male educators. It was very difficult for me to fully disengage. I still need to be present for my students in the building. You know, when I first started looking at becoming a teacher, I had a wealthy white friend in Napa County that encouraged me to become a teacher in his area, which was mostly all white at the time, to teach his son. And I kind of said, no, I really want to be a part of the solution for the Richmond community. But actually, over the years, I've come to realize he has a very valid point because his blonde haired, blue eyed child needs a Black educator in front of him. And if you stop and think of all the police brutalities and the marginalizations and the ill treatment of African Americans by the hands of educators and others in the community, we come to realize that if they only had more exposure growing up to Black educators and other Black folks, they would be different in their approach. And I was reflecting on this before coming to this space and realized my first Black male educator wasn't until I got to college. And I had maybe two Black female educators. Black men play an important role in the educational community. And I really hope that we as educators, as a union, as Black folks, and in any capacity that we have, could build um, the rosters of more Black educators into these classrooms. And I'll stop there because I have a lot more to say and share, but I want to share the space with my brother Dwayne.
I want to make sure I'm saying your last name right all these years. Is it Shafer, Dwayne?
Yes, sir. It's Shafer. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Again, my name is Dwayne Shafer. And they always say the best for last as an introduction. I am a community college faculty member. I'm at Long Beach City College as a counseling counselor. That means a career counselor, excuse me. And I've been doing that. This is my 26th year in that. But prior to that, I worked at the CSU. I worked at three different CSUs. One was CSU Stanislaus, where I received my undergraduate degree, CSU Los Angeles, where I received my master's degree, and CSU Dominguez Hills. And so basically, as I added up, that's like 39 years in higher education. Yes, I started when I was 14. Um, I found myself in higher ed mainly just to get a degree so I can get into the world to work. I never thought about going into education. And I'm really surprised I didn't, because my my aunts on my father's side, who grew up, my family hailed from Mississippi, as they call it, the Delta, and all three of them are educators. Even my grandmother was an educator. She started in Head Start. Not thinking that would be something I would get into, but as I played around and looked at opportunities that presented themselves, because I really wanted to work in the world of fashion. And my father said, I think you might want to try something different. You can do that on your time, but on my time, you're going to do something different. So worked in higher ed and loved it. Matter of fact, the only reason I went back to school to get my master's degree was because of a student that I was helping graduate from Cal State LA said, you'd be a good counselor. You ought to do this. And as I looked into it, it required me to go back to school. I did not want to. I said, okay, let's do this thing. But lo and behold, I found out that I can take 2 classes at the master level for $3 because I was an employee of CSU. So because of that cost of being very nominal, then I said, okay, let's go back to school and do this. And I have never looked back after finishing that program and moving into higher ed. Um, I have served in various capacities as far as the union is concerned. I started working with CCA as a board member, Community College Association, and then I became an officer at my local. As Toby, I was the first African American male to be president at Long Beach City College. Even starting in 1996 and 1999, I was the first African American male. Amazing, totally amazing. I've done a lot of firsts like that in my life. And, never looking to be the first, but just wanting to do something different to cause a different impact or different outcome that could be or something better or improved or enhanced, however you wish to view that. So oftentimes I moved into different circles or avenues or areas just because of sheer interest. And then lo and behold, I become the leader in that area and have done a tremendous amount of work and continue to do so as a CTA board member representing community colleges that we represent throughout the state, as well as our student CTA program. So I will stop there and give it back to our moderator.
I appreciate you lifting up first, Dwayne and Robert. I was struck by this conversation around the first African American teacher that you had. Dwayne, did you have any African American teachers while you were in grade school, high school, etc.? What can you tell us about some early African American educators, if you had any?
I did. I had one in third grade and I had one in fifth grade. In third grade, it was a lady, and I forget her name. I don't know why, but she also became principal of the school while I was there. The educator that I had in fifth grade was a male, and his name was Mr. Wells. Excuse me, not Dr. Wells, but Mr. Wells. And uh, something about male educators, as many of you have already heard, is that usually when they speak, things happen. It's not a question, it's a statement made, and you must move into action. Kind of like he threw out a verb and you go on and take care of that. So that has been my interaction with the male educator. And I never really uh, saw the impact of that, I guess, because my father played a very heavy role in my life. And I viewed him as my first educator. So that is very, very interesting. But those two, Mr. Wells, I kind of think about frequently in fifth grade. But in high school, I really didn't. All the educators I had in high school were white, male and female.
Yeah, as you guys are going through, the school system, Van Cedric, Toby, did you have any black teachers?
I have one,
Yeah.
and that's part of the reason why I wanted to become an educator. She was my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Hayes. I'll never forget her. She was a shorter in stature, but she was a powerhouse. And she just, I became her aide, and I was able to help her through my chemistry class. And it was just such a great experience, and not knowing until I was a lot older that when I was, you go through the second grade, you say, what do you want to be as when you grow up? And on that, my father passed. I found this in his paperwork that I wanted to be a teacher when I was in the second grade. So, I just put the two together and I thought, wow, this is destiny. So it's Mrs. Hayes, and I credit her for showing me the love that I could really enjoy.
Well, let me call you out for a second, Robert. I know you were chair of African American Caucus for CTA. Part of the question I have is like, how does being a black male educator impact your advocacy within CTA? Or, what does that look like as we're in CTA leadership? And you're all in various levels, working in various ways within CTA leadership. So maybe you can talk, number one, Robert, about like what is CTA African American Caucus? What was that like to be chair? And secondly, how does being a black male educator impact um, leadership within our organization?
Thank you, Seth. First, I want to just go back to my entry to union work. Very early, before I had permanent status, I had a local president, a CTA board member, and an NEA board member that basically reached out to me and said, you need to get involved. That was my ethnic minority early identification program. That was my village that basically pulled me into the association. And I very quickly got involved at state council. And it was through state council that I was introduced to the African American Caucus. And actually, not just gently shoved in, I was pushed in to running for a position and immediately hit the ground running. And so within the caucus, I had an opportunity to move up in the ranks with there and to advocate within the association for African American issues. So within CTA, we have various caucuses, ethnic caucuses, uh, and others alike, that basically make sure that our issues within the association are not overlooked. And so we brought forward new business items, and we made sure that there was a space in our, well, we now call it REACT, but it was EMAC at the time, ethnic minority, excuse me, EMAC being ethnic minority, oh, it's been so long. Well, we now call ourselves REACT, Racial Equity Affairs Committee. It's good to forget some things. In any case, so we put our issues on the table in that joint space, as well as within the association by way of the caucus and the caucus leadership. We also, I'm proud to say, we offer a scholarship through the caucus named after Dr. Lois Tenson to ensure that we have a pipeline to support more African Americans entering education. So if there's anybody within listening of this meeting, please reach out to the CTA African American Caucus to get information on that scholarship, because it's geared towards increasing the number of African American educators in the classroom.
And Seth, if I can just add, Robert mentioned Dr. Lois Tenson, and she was the first Black African American president of this organization. And I'm not sure of the years in which she served because it was before my time, but I do know that she was the very first. And so I am following her footsteps, and I hope I didn't misspeak when I said that I was the first Black male president of this organization. And as Robert stated too, I would encourage everyone on here, regardless of your ethnicity, to look into the African American Caucus and also the other caucuses that we have, because it is a great way to advocate for the issues that are particularly sensitive to your community if you happen not to be a Black person.
I appreciate that, Toby. Let me turn to you, Van Cedric. I want you to think not just about, now you serve as an NEA board member. So what does it mean to be a Black male educator as you're moving up through leadership? But also in terms of the community. I know the community sees, teachers in a certain way favorably at the moment, which is wonderful. It's important work we do. But what does it mean to be a Black male educator and being engaged with community? How does that look in terms of shaping your activism, not just within our organization, but within the community?
Thank you, Seth, for that. You know, I want to say that one of the things that, as a Black male educator, that we should always be mindful of is that we are in a institution that has not um, been as supportive for us as you know since it's been created. Really, we've had to make our own space, and when we've merged with our larger institutions, it's been really inflexible at times for Black male educators. So being that I'm at this place at this time, I think about all of the previous Black male educators who have come before me, who have really um, was not detoured in getting their message across and educating their particular students and creating opportunities for communities. And I want to continue that. I think, as Oprah Winfrey said, of all of our Black male educators or our ancestors, I stand on top of them 10,000 strong, right? And so I'm really excited to engage any and every conversation when it comes to how do we bring more Black males to the education field? How do we create spaces for our students? You know, how do we create a love and affirm space for our students? How do we help our young folks find their identity and affirm it? How do we help our young folks feel safe and have a sense of belonging? How do we help our young folks become academically prepared, empowered, and really just being healthy and having a full range of emotions? So that's where I stand. In any given time, I would love to have those conversations. But the thing about it is, those conversations stand for all students, right? And for all students should have that. And so I think that we know as Black males, it's really important to lift up that conversation. And so I am proud to lift that up for our educators as well as our students. And that's really how I proceed. I think, you know, when we educators have a sense of belonging, our students have a sense of belonging. When our educators feel empowered, so does our students. And so I think it's kind of it is, as educators, we're connected to our students so much that we want to create these safe spaces for them. And so I love to engage that conversation. Thank you, my brother.
And there was a lot
You know,
there.
Seth, I want to kind of piggyback on what Van Cedric has said there. I'm looking through the lens of higher ed. And one of the things is, you know, we all have ideas. And oftentimes when we're new to an environment, we take a scan. We look around and see what's working, what isn't working, what's connecting, what's not connecting. And I remember for myself, when I first started at Long Beach City College, community colleges have what are called transfer centers. Nothing new. It started out as a pilot, and then they became to be expected on each campus. Well, when I started at Long Beach City College, we only had one. We have two campuses, not two colleges, but two campuses. And one of the campuses, which was a more affluent area, had a transfer center. The one that was not in an affluent area did not have a transfer center. And so representatives from the various institutions didn't go to that other campus, a smaller campus, to talk to students to even think about transferring. So I said, that'll be something we need to do. And I thought it was going to be so easy to do. Went through the processes, we all have processes. And I brought it up. And at first it was embraced, and it's like, oh no, we can't do that. Well, as a friend of mine told me some years ago, good idea, wrong time. And so it took 7 years from that 1996. You add seven to that would make it 2003 was when we were able to have a transfer center at another school, at our other campus, excuse me. So that wasn't because, I stopped. I continued to be persistent, but looked at avenues and ways that will be able to maneuver to have this happen. And that's what I see about people of color. Just because the door closes on in your face, and it often does, doesn't mean we stop. Doesn't mean we don't start coalescing people to help us. It don't mean that we don't find allies to help us along the way to ensure that this happens, especially when it's something that is so needed and can break down several barriers. And so, as we look at that, and that's one of the things I really pride myself about my brothers here is that we don't let the word no stop. And no is can be a very powerful word, you know, especially when people apply for a scholarship and they hear the word no or something of that nature. But, you know, as people of color and our ancestors have shown us this, and as I speak of ancestors, I just want to put a period here and say that tomorrow is the birth date of W.E.B. Du Bois. February 23rd, 1868. And we've seen many of his writings he has produced that have been so powerful still today in 2022. So I say that as one of our ancestors that have really helped us along the way. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be adversarial along the way as well. And I'll stop there.
I appreciate that. That's a good concrete example too. If you guys have examples, let's hear about it. I'm wondering, for anyone in the group, like, I mean, Van Cedric lifted up a bunch of big picture ideas here, you know, belonging and you know, affirming identity. What are the big issues that are facing Black educators, that are facing Black students, that are facing Black communities? And what you just described, I think, is important, Dwayne, to talk about how do you get past the barriers that you face. So it's a two-part question. What are the big issues that we're facing as educators, as students, as a community? And how do we get past the barriers that we face? It's a big question.
I'll jump into this and continue it a little bit more as people are percolating. I know you're thinking about it. One of the things that has come across my path is exposure, giving students experiences beyond what they normally experience. What I found working in Long Beach is that a lot of students never been to downtown LA. And we know that Long Beach is not that far from downtown LA with all the public transit that we have, or Ubers, or even friends with cars who can drive us down there. And so, one of the things that was really important was to give students exposure to opportunities, to HBCUs. Also, we used to do this. We still do this thing called the Northern Cal Tour, where we took students to Northern California. Now, I know that's where Van Cedric is, and also Robert. Oh, and also Toby are in Northern California. But we took them to colleges like, CSU East Bay. We took them to UC Berkeley. We also took them to Sac State, San Francisco State, and we also had the audacity to take them to Stanford University. And when these students stepped on these campuses, in particular Stanford, oh my, their posture changed. They're like, I cannot believe I am here at Stanford visiting. Then the next question was, can I be here at Stanford as a student? And several of them did apply, and one did get in, our only African American student, only student, I should say, that attended and graduated. Not just attended, we got those who are ABDs, but I'm talking about attended and graduated, and came back and spoke to the student body about that experience, what that meant, what it was like. Can others do this? Yes, you can. And so those exposures and experiences, a lot of students are still talking about today and doing it because it wasn't a barrier. There was a $50 cost. Many of the faculty on campus reached into their pockets to pay for that, to eliminate that cost so they could go. Now, $50 is not a lot of money, but if you don't have it, it is. So the exposure, not only of that Northern Cal trip, but other things that are happening in the community, talking to business leaders, thinking about being an entrepreneur, whatever that is for each individual. But having the opportunity to have dialogue in a place where you can say anything so that you can learn how to do this appropriately out in the community so that people won't be looking at you as you're busting verbs, if you will, or people won't be looking at you because you're not dressed appropriately. All those different things are set aside because you know how to do that. And if you need assistance, you knew where to go on campus to get that. So being available is one thing, but also being intentional about disrupting the processes, the paths, and things intentionally with people and letting them know this is real. Now, I will say some students will say, I don't believe it. You know, I don't believe fat meat is greasy until they try it. And then when they try and realize that the people who said they are here, they meant that they are here.
I almost feel like our presence sometimes can be a disrupting presence. I feel like the numbers of Black male educators, in California and across the nation is really low. Van Cedric, Toby, how do you find a sense of belonging? I know that you lifted up that idea, Van Cedric, belonging. It's an issue I think that Black male educators face. How do you find your people in the public education system?
Well, thank you, Seth, for that. I look at it like we're really trying to work on building an affirmative community, Black educators, right? I think that's really important. And I think that community of Black educators really tie into us building a community school for our students, right? I think as our public school system, as everybody know, and we've probably said it many times, it's been the same type of school system for 100 plus years. And we're right now on, right now, but actually previously, the last 20 plus years, we've really been looking for new models of engagement. And our community schools model is one, a place of partnership between schools and communities. And I think that as a Black male educator, community is important to us. We love socializing. We love hanging out. And if we don't have but $1 in our pocket, we can hang out with our friends all day long. And so community is an essential for Black educators, I believe. And I'm sure for all community, for all educators. A sense of community is what rural schools go through, as well as what urban schools go through. We're trying to really define it. And I think that's what we bring to this conversation is that we love to build community. We are embracing other cultures. We share our cultures with other cultures and other teachers. And we are really an open book because community has been the foundation of really our survival in this country. And so I think that it's really important when you see a Black male educator or engage, we are open to these conversations of what does the next steps look like in a way that builds community at school sites. And I think that community is founded in love for our kids, love for our families, love for our parents, love from the spirituals that have been a part of our growing up. And I think that um, that sense of community, and that's what I said, a sense of belonging in your community. I think we've had that throughout. It doesn't matter, what your gender is. It doesn't matter, what you call yourself. It is when you are around a group of uh, Black community members, you're always embraced. And so I think we bring that to the classroom. Our kids, we bring that to our kids. I say to my kids, oh, you think you're crazy? I'm crazier than you, right? I'm crazy. Oh, you got a crazy uncle? I got a crazy uncle. You got a crazy mom? I got a crazy mom, right? And so we can go tit for tat. But what I'm saying to them is that my community and your community is the same. And so I think that is like really one of the pillars that we really stand by that connects us to each other, but connects us to other ethnicities and other cultures as well. Thank you.
Toby, what do you think are some of the bigger issues, especially when you think about students? What are some bigger issues that Black male students are facing right now? I think it's, a unique identity in terms of Black male students and some of the hurdles that we face as earlier was being discussed, we have institutions that maybe are not always welcoming. So how do we carve a path forward? What kind of systems do we need to dismantle? And what are the big issues that are facing Black students right now? Black male students.
Well, and we can put a focus on the Black male students, but I think it's just Black students in general. And from my point of view and from my landscape that I see things, it's the lack of hope. That would be the first thing that's missing, and that we have to instill that into our communities. And it's not just, it goes beyond just words, because we can say things and they can say a thousand ways, but until there's action behind the words is when they will really truly start feeling that they have a possibility. And Ben Cedric, I cannot disagree with you about the sense of family, because when you have that in there, there is that hope, there is that love, there is that desire to not only, when you said please you because they connect with you, but it's also because they connect with the people around them. And it begins with the parents. I we've done a disservice to our community when we think that our parents should not be a part of this. We have to figure a way in order to connect the three of us, because it has to be the community, the parents, and the educators that get us where we need when it comes to offering that sense of hope that our students and that the educators. When I became an educator, I was the only Black in my school. Well, I can't say that, excuse me. The cafeteria lady was also Black. But I was placed in the school. I didn't choose the school. I was placed there because I knew that they needed to start thinking about, how do we get people that look like the students, to show them that there is hope out there, that you can do something other than, and as I told my parents when I first became a kindergarten educator, I can't sing, I can't dance, and I'm horrible at a lot of sports. But I'm going to be a disciplinarian for your child. I'm going to show them the love that they need in order to make sure that they get what they get in terms of educational value, so that I can build something that I can send them to the next grade and say, hey, this is what I've instilled. And this is what you have to build off on. And so I have parents come to me, but we don't have that a lot. We are there, we're in survival mode because our Black educators, male in particular, don't have that support system in place that they can turn to and say, hey, Robert, I had a really rough day, man. Can you give me some suggestions on how I can deal with this situation? We don't have enough of that. And we need to start sooner trying to recruit our people to go into this profession, one that I know that the gentlemen here love and care about and will fight for. We have to do a better job at doing that. So, but the number one thing, Seth, is hope. We have to give our community and our students, especially those that are Black and brown that looks like us, that's the key.
I want to follow up with you, Toby, on something you said. I think we all have a crazy uncle, and we all also may all have somebody. We may have lived that situation where we're the only African American in a school community, or more likely the only African American male in a school community. Toby, how do you find a sense of belonging in that? What what was your thought in terms of being the lone African American male in that campus?
It was lonely.
Yeah.
It was lonely. And then what I tried to do is I tried to seek out other folks that looked like me. If they didn't look like me, they acted like me, So it's like, someone that I could just have some type of communion with. So, I started making sure that I was talking to my parents, you know, being a part of the students' after school programs, expanding my frame of reference. And so I, started doing a program called MESA Math Engineering, for students underrepresented. It used to be called MESA Math Engineering Science Achievement for underrepresented minorities, and then we had to change that because of all of the rhetoric about you can't discriminate, you can't do this and that. It was for people that didn't go into the sciences and maths. And so I became a part of that. And so then I expanded my network of people that wasn't necessarily in my school, but were looking for things in order to connect with the community. So that was part of it. So you just reach outside your little area.
Well, let me flip it over to Robert for a second here. Let's think about our organization, CTA. We talked about some of the things we're doing. I know we're big into a community schools transformation at the moment. Like, what does CTA need to do better to support Black educators, to support Black students, to support the Black community? What is your thought, Robert? What do we need to do better?
I think we need to increase the communication to our members and to the community around what it means to have Black educators, particularly Black African American educators in the classroom. I heard it mentioned earlier about engaging with the parents. Absolutely, we need to be engaged with every parent group and so forth. But unfortunately, some of our students uh, don't really have that engaged parent. I heard Dwayne mention that his father was his first teacher. I can't claim that. My parents were, well, I came from a very challenging home, and my parents were fairly absent from my upbringing. It was the school community in Los Angeles, those UTLA members, that basically saved my life and gave me the hope to be focused on education and the future. So that's where I got the hope that Toby mentioned. And I really would like for CTA to support our members in bringing up that hope and engaging with the community, but also putting the spotlight on how important it is to have us in front of not just African American male students, but all students. And how it's important for us to teach our male students what it's like to be a young man and actually a child, a male Black child. We need to stop allowing our society to put our African American young men into a place of being grown before they really are. They are children first. They need to be able to be sensitive to the world around them and also to be able to come into their own with regards to their gender identity. I had a young man when I first started teaching, when and I teach elementary, I started with first grade. The question of the day is, what would you like to be when you grow up? And his answer was, and this is an African American boy, he wanted to be Britney Spears. And I had to unpack that a little bit. Well, you can't be her, but since she's a good singer, you can sing. In some other spaces, that child would have been chastised for one, trying to identify with a white person, let alone trying to identify with a female. I really think it's important for us to let them be children first, to grow into their own skin and identity, and teach them how to respect one another as they grow up. But I think as an association, going back to your original question, we need to put the spotlight on engaging with the community and supporting our African American students and bringing up more, increasing the pipeline, if you would, of African American educators and increasing that pipeline to not just get us into the profession, but to stay. Unfortunately, once we get in the door, there are folks that are stereotyping us, assuming that either we're a coach and we're not, or that we're teaching higher ed or high school. No offense to Dwayne, but the bottom line is some of us actually enjoy working with the little ones. And that's one of the other reasons why I got into this profession. I was working with criminals as an adult, and a good friend of mine said, you know what, you might want to start before they get into the system. And that I did. And it's so important that we do that, but also allow our students to, or rather not our students, but allow our educators to Resist the temptation for a few extra dollars to go into administration. We need African American male educators in front of the students in the classroom, not down the hall in the office. So we need to put a spotlight on that and maintain that pathway and let them know this is a very rewarding profession. And honestly, I have no desires to be anything but a classroom teacher working with students that look like me and look like others in the community.
Right on, right on. Dwayne, what do we need to do better? What do we need to do better in terms of supporting educators, students who are Black men? What do we need to do better in terms of the Black community?
I totally believe in what Toby said about hope. Hope is very, very important, can carry you through things when times are hard and rough. And Robert said it too, communication. And the word I would add to communication is authentic communication, making sure that you're not just getting your point across, but you're listening. You're hearing what people, where they are, and lifting them up from where they are to where they want to go. Um, One of the things, several things I love about community college. I intentionally went to community college because I didn't want to deal with parents. I didn't want to deal with the laws that all go with it, all that sort of stuff. My first master's class was a principalship course. I immediately withdrew and changed to counseling. So I know that is not the place for me, but I am so thankful that there are others who want to move into that direction. So, first of all, you got to know yourself and what you're really capable of. I would have heard a whole lot of students. Robert probably saw them at adults. Anyway, the other thing at the community college is always viewed as a second chance. When students can't graduate or haven't graduated from high school, they can come to community college and start it all over again. No SAT, no ACT, no whatever, you know. I mean, now it's caught up because if you don't have a high school diploma or GED, you don't get financial aid. So there's that gap. So nonetheless, though, listening, authentic, and working. The other part of it too is, and the community will do this, will pull you aside when you are acting out of order. And oftentimes, that kind of, gets a little bit limited because it's like, I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm not going to do this. And it's like, no, I do not want my brother or my sister to go down like this. And all I need to do is pull them aside and have a conversation and say, try this, move in this direction. Because just because things aren't going well, and they don't, I'm not saying this is an easy path, and it has never been an easy path for me. But I always look at how can I maneuver this? How do I get people to understand what I'm trying to do? And if they want to join me, fine. If they don't, get out of my way. The other things is that we talk about are gatekeepers. We didn't mention that today, but there are people who are keeping people away and out, saying that you can't, you shouldn't, you ought not. Let people get in. Come on in, join us. Move in this direction. I know personally, I need a union because I know me. And so therefore, I'm so thankful to be in the union. I learned this from my father. He said, you better be in the union. I'm telling my daughter, who is a nurse, get into the union. You need to be a part of that union because you're going to need some protection somewhere along the way because someone's going to say something and it's going to be believed. And now we got to go through the process of examining and proving otherwise. So for African American males, it looks like it's easy for us because we are sitting in certain places and doing certain things. But believe you me, just because we don't talk about it publicly doesn't mean that we have not taken a record of what has gone down and realize how do we navigate that. And you got to have your organizers. I mean, and the organizers sometimes aren't you. I'm an only child, so everybody's always been a brother and sister to me. So I always look for that and seeing if they can continue to be that because sometimes I gotta let them go. So I say all that is that it never stops. I don't want you to think it's done and it's over. No, that's just one moment. You got the next moment. You got the next moment. You have the next moment or the next year. So as we pull together the community of the people who we know we can be truly authentic with and help us navigate this, that's what we need. And we need to continue this. And I think we need to have even a broader discussion, not just with us, but with more African Americans and stuff. Because one of the things that when you in light company, it becomes very easy to talk and people are amening you and whatever the case may be. All we need to do is get us some cornbread and some fried chicken or something, and we're gonna be fine. And I'm not saying that stereotypically, I'm saying it because that's good. But nonetheless, if we don't have those, we have to find those and make those. You know, I've gone to primarily white institutions. You know, when I was at CSU Stanislaus, very few of us there. When I was in my master class, excuse me, but when I was in my upper division classes in my business program, I was the only one. Now I didn't let that stop me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get whatever I can from these other folks who don't look like me, and I'm gonna move on. And so you have to kind of change your thing. It's not that I was out to get them, because what they wanted, I wanted, and we all could attain it. Because when we start thinking of like it's a shortage, we only have so much resources available, then we get a little cutthroat. So we have to realize there's other resources, may not be here, but we have to go somewhere else and find it. So always being on the hunt, always connecting the dots. I pride myself on that. My personal motto is helping students get off stuck because they've used their limited resources or their limited thought to think that's it. And then the next thing you find out, there's another opportunity. Case in point, I'm gonna shut up after this because I know I can fill up the space. And I know some of us got to go at 5. Is I remember when I first got my full-time job at Long Beach City College. I applied at 2 places, Santa Monica College and Long Beach. I didn't really want to work at Long Beach City College. I really wanted to work in Santa Monica just because the environment was good. As we hear about part-time and full-time faculty, it was never none of that. We all were faculty, regardless of what our classification were, full or part-time. We all were equally treated. And it was awesome. And I didn't get the job at Santa Monica. I did get an offer at obviously Long Beach. That's where I'm at. And I was perplexed by it. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Do I want to stay here? What do I do? And one of my colleagues at Santa Monica College told me, he's a career counselor. He said, you can always apply for another job. That was so freeing. When I heard that I can apply for another job, I forgot about that. I could apply for another job because I felt that because I had this, I had to stick with it and to get the proverbial, gold handshake when I retire. But no, I could have moved elsewhere. But what I did find out at Long Beach City College was how to maneuver through there where I could be my authentic self without anybody trying to pull and tug me in other directions and being able to say, no, thank you. So I'll stop there and let somebody else speak.
Seth, I'm gonna try to make this quick. One of the things I don't want us to forget about is our Black classified, our paraeducators. As I say all the time, they are the backbone of every school. I've been fortunate. We have paraeducators with 15, 20, 30 years worth of experience. That should be enough to get you to become a teacher. Like our districts, I mean, as a local, we really need to continue to urge our districts to support the programs from classified paraeducators to teachers programs. Those are so important to really bring our homegrown talent in. We have Black educators as security. They're doing a lot of social and emotional work with our students. It's really important for us to have those conversations, continue to lift up our classifieds as well. I think that's really important. And also we have to make sure that, with Black family engagement, we have to make sure our students, our Black students with disabilities, are always welcome. The families are always welcome. It's a different type of game sometimes when our kids are, have been identified for special ed or have a special disability. And we need to really bring that in to reach out again in a way that will be engaging to all Black staff who are holding up the school. That is so important. So thank you very much. And our after school staff. We have a lot of young Black students who are doing after school programs, and I'm always encouraging them to keep their mind open and provide those opportunities. Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, and I was going to say that what we need to do is we need to figure a way in order to connect with our Black students before they get this mindset that they have to be a basketball player or some type of athlete that's going to make all this money, when in fact we know that that number is very small. And they are out there. But once they get in, we need to make sure that we offer the support and the help to just help them navigate these waters, because it is a shark and fill tank that will eat you alive if you do not have that support behind you in order to make sure that the person knows that they can be successful, that they can succeed. And we also need to truly start looking at our HBCUs and recruiting there and letting them know that, hey, this is a truly, truly noble profession and that they can make a difference. Because if we know that, if we let that be known to our young folk, then we'll be all right in a better place. So I'm going to stop there, Seth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toby. Um, just want to let those folks who have joined us know you can find other recordings of previous Tuesday Takeover for Racial and Social Justice events on the CTA website, the Racial Equity Affairs Committee page. But do want to thank you guys truly for joining us this evening. And I hope you found this panel discussion as nourishing as I did. Brothers, thank you for sharing with us this evening. And we'll conclude with Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Good night.